Are you interested in making money with woodworking? Well, this video is for you. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make this super awesome planter just using fence pickets. So if you've been doing any research at all on making money with woodworking, there's going to be one thing that always comes up. And that thing we have covered on this channel since day one. And that's going to be garden planters. But the buzz that I've been seeing around this year's planter market indicates that this is going to be a huge year for sales. So when the market is primed for sales, that means it's time for you to head to your workspace and get your build on. So are you ready to learn how to make what could be this year's top seller? Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so let's cut some parts for these tall planters. You know me, I really like fence pickets, so that's what I'm going to make it out of. Now again, you can use pallet wood material or really about anything that you want, but that's completely up to you. So whatever material that you've decided to use, go ahead and grab that and let's head over to the table saw. And as always, I'm going to teach you step by step on how to make this awesome planter. But if you're a plans in the hand type of person, head over to my website. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. So the first thing that I'm going to do to my pickets is rip off one edge. This is going to give me a nice clean edge to put against my fence. And then I'll start ripping my material down to 2.5 inches. So this material we'll be using for our 4 side frames. Essentially all of these parts will be using 2.5-inch material, except for our 4 leg connecting boards. They'll be 2 inches. So I'm going to rip down 2 strips that are 2 inches wide. But I want my frames to contrast the color of my back panels, so I'll be leaving those natural. And just like the frame material, I'll be ripping down my back panel material at 2.5 inches. Now if you notice that this material has a lot more color to it, well the reason for that is that I've already put a clear coat on 4 of my boards. That's just going to save me a step before I assemble these. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a bit. So now with all my material ripped down, let's head over to the miter saw. So for our first parts, let's go ahead and start with our 2-inch strips, just so we don't get it mixed up with the 2.5 inch. So for this 2-inch material, we'll be needing 4 boards that are 30 inches long. Then once we get those cut, moving to our 2.5-inch material, we'll be needing 4 more boards that are 30 inches long. All of these will be used to make up our legs. And then we'll be needing 8 connector boards that will go between the legs. These will need to be 11 inches long. And then for the back of each one of our panels, we're going to be needing 10 boards that are 14 inches long. This is going to be the material that I've already put a finish on. So once you have your main frame parts cut out, that would be a perfect time to go ahead and stain or paint this material. As you can see, I decided to paint mine a dark gray, which I think will look great to contrast this cedar. We'll see. Now let's go ahead and finish up the prepping of our parts by adding some pocket holes to our connector boards. So all of our pocket holes will be placed on the ends of our connector boards. These are going to tie all of our legs together. Since the material that I'm using is a 1/2 inch thick, I'll have my drill bit set to 1/2 inch and install 2 pocket holes on each end of my connector boards on the back. Alright, so now that we have our pocket holes cut into each one of our connector boards, let's go ahead and start putting these assemblies together. So we have 4 of the 2-inch legs and 4 of the 2.5-inch legs. I'm just going to start off with the 2.5-inch legs, putting the faces down. Then we'll be needing 2 of our connector boards. For our top connector board, we'll just install that even with the top of our legs. We'll measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom of our legs and install our board there. Really, that's all there is to it for assembling our frames. We'll just repeat this for the rest of our legs. And if you decided to pre-paint or stain your material, go ahead and wipe up any squeeze out from the glue. Alright, so now that we have our 4 frames assembled, let's go ahead and install our backboards. So I'm going to start off with our frames with the 2-inch sides. We'll call these our 2 side panels. The first thing that we'll do is to measure up 3 inches from the bottom of each one of our legs. Then I'll put down a little wood glue and line up one of my backboards at our 3-inch lines. Then I'll make sure that our backboard is a 1/2 inch from the side, and then nail it into place using 7/8 crown staples or brad nails. Now yes, you can absolutely screw these into place if you'd like, but I think that using exterior wood glue and pneumatic fasteners will hold just fine. Now with our first board installed, we're just going to repeat this with 9 more backboards. Now keep in mind, if you've already added a finish to the face of these, that side needs to be facing down. And there's our first panel. I think that these things are going to end up looking awesome. Let's go ahead and finish the rest of these up, and then I'm going to add a couple of strips to this that's really going to set it off. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Then you'll just repeat that step for the second side panel. So we'll start off by measuring 3 inches up from the bottom of our legs. Then we'll make sure that they're spaced 1 inch in from each side. We'll throw in our brad nails or crown staples, and you're cooking with grease. And let's say that you're going to be making a lot of these to sell. You can make a simple jig that would make all of this go even quicker. Or here's a little tip that will speed things up. Anytime that you're installing repeat cuts that stack on top of each other, just get your first piece installed, then lay the rest of your material out so that it's a little close to the edge. Then that's all that you have to do is to push the material in with your ruler and install the nails. This takes out one motion and actually frees up another hand. And when you're making things to sell, all of these things come into play. So this next step is going to be completely optional, and I actually encourage people to try different things with this. What I've done for this is to cut 3 strips that are 1 inch wide by 23.5 inches long. And they're going to fit right between our top and bottom connectors. All that I have to do to really set this off is to measure the inside of my panel and center up these strips at 2.5 inches, 5.5 inches, and 8.5. Then I'll just lock these into place using crown staples or brad nails. So now that we have all 4 panels made up, we have our front and back, then we have our narrower side panels. Now we need to think about the depth of the floor for this thing. So basically how much room that we need for our pot whenever it goes in here. Now most of the potted plants will actually nest down in these things, and the rim of the bucket that it's in will actually sit on top of the edges of this. But let's say that you wanted to put a pot in here that didn't have a lip. Most of those 3-gallon pots are between 10 and 12 inches deep. So let's go ahead and design this one so that you can put the floor at 12 inches, or you can move it to 10 if you'd like. Let me show you. So to do this, we're simply going to add a couple of shelf brackets to each one of our side panels. Since we still have 1/2 inch trim to add to the tops of this, and we want our shelves to be at 10 and 12 inches, we're going to measure down 10 inch and 12 inch from our tops. We'll do this for both sides. And then for our shelf brackets, we'll take 1 inch material that's 14 inches long and install it so that the top edges are against our marks. Then we'll do this for both of our side panels. Once we complete the next step of joining all of our panels, we'll install the floors in this thing. Okay, so now it's time to actually join our panels. So for that, we'll take a wide panel or a front and back panel and our side panels, and our front and back panels will actually overlap these side panels, just like this. So now to lock these panels together, I'm going to install some 1 inch exterior screws in the edges of my front and back panels. Let's go ahead and pre-drill and countersink all of those to make this super easy. So these screws will only need to be installed in the front and back panels. So let's start off by pre-drilling and counterboring each one of our screw placements. So to lock everything together, down each leg, let's drill and counterbore at 1 inch, 7.5, 15 inches, 22.5, and 29 inches. So the reason why we pre-drill is to keep the material from splitting, as the screw shaft goes through the wood. And the reason why we countersink is to keep the material from splitting as the screw head goes into the wood. So basically we're doing all this to keep the material from splitting. If you've ever tried to join material with screws super close to the edge without doing this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And here's another trick for quickly duplicating screw placement. Instead of marking out the 1 inch, 7.5, 15, so on and so forth on each side of each panel, simply mark it on a piece of scrap wood and use that as your guide. Now that we have all of our screw placement marks, let's go ahead and pre-drill and countersink. We'll be 1/4 inch in from the edge. Now with both panels pre-drilled and countersunk, let's go ahead and connect the panels together. And again, our front and back overlaps the sides. And once I have it to where I want it, I'm just going to throw in a little squeeze clamp here in the middle. This is just going to help hold these 2 parts together until I get a screw in the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to be pre-drilling these through the exact same holes that we already did in the last step. And the reason why is because the screws are going to be going into the panel that we did not pre-drill yet. Now would this material crack? Possibly, possibly not. But if you pre-drill it, it's not going to. So once you get this far into a project, you definitely don't want to start cutting corners. Perfect. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm using 1 inch exterior deck screws. Now you could also glue these if you'd like, but for me I'm just going to use screws in case I want to take this apart at the end of the season. And you'll just continue doing this all the way around the planter. Once you have all 4 sides locked down, it's time to move on to the next step. All right, so now it's starting to come together. This thing is awesome. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put our shelf boards on the inside of this where we put our brackets earlier. So for this, I've cut 3 boards using 2.5-inch material that are 13 5/8 inch long. So this length will allow us to loosely install our boards. So right now they're in the 12-inch section, and let's say that you have a 10-inch pot instead. So instead of stacking rocks and bricks, you know that you've done it. I know that I've done it. You just simply take these out and then set them on the 10-inch rails. This is a much cleaner, easier way to do it. Okay, so now that we have our adjustable floor installed, let's go ahead and install our top trim. Okay, so for this top trim, we're going to be using the exact same material that we've used for the rest of this. Picket material that's 2.5 inches wide, 18 inches long, and each end is cut on a 45-degree angle. Now that we have our top trim cut, measure out our screw placement for these. Now since our edges are mitered, that needs to be 1.25 inches up from the bottom. That needs to be at 3 inches, 9 inches, and 15 inches. So once I have my first one marked out, I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill my holes. Then I'll use this as a template for the rest. And if you haven't figured it out by now, I love me a good template or a jig. Measure once, drill several times. Now with everything pre-drilled, let's go ahead and countersink. All right, so now that we have all of our trim pre-drilled and countersink, let's go ahead and get this installed. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this on the ground so I don't have to climb around and stand on buckets. So now that we have our planter at a workable height, let's go ahead and get these installed. So using the screw hole placement, I've designed this trim to overhang the inside by 1 inch. So as you're laying this out, just make sure that you have your 1 inch overhang on the inside. All right, so check this out. This is one of my favorite designs yet. This thing turned out awesome. So not only does this thing look awesome, but I will guarantee you that these things will sell like crazy. So one of the reasons why these will be so popular is because they're big, tall planters that can be used for anything. These things can be used for flowers, ferns, or ornamental bushes. Now can you see what I'm talking about? So we have done it again here on this channel. We have taken common building material, and by adding creativity to it, we have created something totally unique and awesome. So again, I've just taught you step by step on how to make this awesome planter. Now the next step's up to you, and you know exactly what to do. And that is to get your creative juices fired up, get out, and get your build on. Till next time, we'll see you. Imagine taking a pile of wood and turning it into something amazing. Now, imagine doing that without years of frustration. You do not need a fancy workshop, expensive tools, or years of experience. With Woodworking Kickstart, you'll build confidence and real skills in no time. So you can spend years making mistakes and learning the hard way like I did, or you can start building with confidence today. So join me in Woodworking Kickstart and let's get your journey started.